Today we take care of a oil pressure sending unit that's not sending any information, and we'll give the Z an oil change. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Z32 Turbo, our 1990 300ZX Twin Turbo. On today's episode, guys, we're going to address a couple things. First off, I wanted to do an oil change and some other fluids, but I noticed that after my oil change, the oil pressure sending unit isn't functioning at all, and I don't know how I didn't catch that before, but it is stuck at 0 the entire time, which means more than likely the oil pressure sending unit itself is faulty. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that after, of course, I put fresh oil in it. So smart people would do it the other way around because you do lose a little oil when you pull the pressure sending unit out. But regardless, the video is going to be helpful. So I'm going to show you guys how to replace the sending unit if your oil pressure gauge isn't working in your 300ZX. And then we're going to do just a nice oil change. New fluids always help a car like this. So let's get in the garage and get some work done. Here's everything you're going to need to do an oil change on your 300ZX. Pretty straightforward. 10W30 synthetic oil. You're going to need 4.5 quarts of this. Obviously you're going to need a funnel. I went with an OEM Nissan oil filter. You can find whatever filter you prefer. Just keeping it OEM in this case. A filter removal tool to get the old oil filter off of there. And then a ratchet and socket to get the oil drain plug off. And that's all we're going to need. Let's go ahead and get in there and do this oil change. Time to take that drain plug off. It's a 14mm. Have your drain pan handy. Let's see how much of a mess we can make. All right, go ahead and let that drain out, and then we'll take that bright white oil filter off and replace it with an OEM Nissan one. Yeah, we'll let that drain out a little bit so we don't get our hands completely nasty. Service Champ brand. That looks like a quick lube kind of filter, but I'm putting an OEM one on there. Let's go ahead and spin that off and dump it into our drain pan here. Whoop. Again, we'll let all that drain out, and then we'll put our new oil filter in and then our drain plug back on with a new crush washer. All right, time to install the drain plug back into the oil pan. Go ahead and put a nice shiny crush washer on there. Perfect. For our oil filter, we're going to be using that OEM Nissan one I showed you earlier. Guess I haven't seen an OEM Nissan oil filter in a long time, but that is a pretty dang sweet color, guys. I'm into that. Make sure you remove this plastic part. I've seen that where people have left that on there. That's always really good for filtering. A little oil around the rubber ring here that goes a long ways to keeping it, helping it seal on there. Remember, hand tighten these only, guys. No reason to use a tool to put an oil filter on. I'm going to add a little bit of oil just to halfway fill up the filter here. Perfect. All right, and to make sure we don't spill that, go ahead and start tightening that on. So we get that nice and tight by hand. Don't worry, these things always tighten up. They never loosen up. That is such a pretty oil filter. I guess it's been a while since I've done an OEM Nissan oil filter. That is very pretty. All right, we've got the oil filter installed, drain plug torqued down with new copper crush washer. Time to add some oil. Now it's time to add some fresh oil to the 300ZX Turbo. Remove our fresh new OEM oil cap. Go ahead and put a suitable funnel in there. Get it nice and tight so it doesn't spill out. Going with our Mobil 1 high mileage, 10W30 full synthetic. And we're gonna add 4.5 quarts. Go ahead and remove your funnel. Man, that fits so good. Clean up any drips if there are any. Put your oil cap back on. Oil change complete. If your 300ZX or 300ZX twin turbo oil pressure gauge is constantly reading 0, no matter what you do, no matter how many times you tap your dash or give it the beans and get that pressure up, and you know for sure that you have oil in your system, it might be time to replace that oil pressure sending unit. I'm gonna show you guys how to do that today. To find the oil pressure sending unit, you're gonna crawl under your Z, passenger side, close to your oil filter, kind of where it tees off. And this is it right here. You can see this rubber boot covering the back of it. It plugs into where the oil filter housing goes in. So you can see it right there. What we're gonna have to do is take the rubber boot off. We'll cut that zip tie first. The rubber boot kind of protects the electrical connector. Pull the electrical connector off, unscrew the unit. It should be a 14mm kind of nut that's held in place to screw it in. Shouldn't be torqued in too much. And then we'll pull that unit. I really should have done this before doing the oil change because I bet we're gonna lose a little oil now, but hey, that's all part of the fun. So we're gonna go ahead and replace that. When you get your replacement one, make sure it's the right size, kind of compare them first, and then we're just gonna simply swap that out. Let's get this old one out of here. Here's our replacement unit right here, a Beck Arnley, made in Japan. Part number is right here on top of the box. We're gonna go ahead and get the old one off, but we'll be putting this one right on. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this at this time. You can see our fresh oil pressure sending unit there. I'm still under the impression we're gonna lose some oil here, so that is exciting. I hope it's not a lot. So we're gonna go ahead and replace this zip tie. Make sure not to cut the actual electrical connector there. Man, why didn't I do this when I was doing the oil change? And that zip tie kind of serves a purpose just to keep it up out of this lower portion of the car. This little rubber boot should slide right off the unit. Yep, it just kind of serves to protect it. You can see the connector right there. Real simple connector, just squeeze it together, pull it off. Here's the old unit. Now it is going to be a little tricky now that I have an oil filter in there to get the wrench in. So let's see what we can do. I'm actually going to grab an oil drain pan just in case. I know how this stuff goes. It's going to be really tricky to do with the oil filter in place. I'm thinking if I use a stubby one and get in there. All right, let's try with a stubby. All right, I don't think we lost too much oil, so that was a plus. Let's get this all tightened up nicely. All right, nice and tight. We didn't lose much oil at all. Might not be a bad idea to just add a little bit. Let's clean off our fresh OEM Nissan oil filter. Definitely the prettiest oil filter I've ever seen. I didn't know they were such an awesome blue color. But here we go, let's clean up all this drip in here. Nice. Not a bad idea to clean up this little protector cap too, make everything look nice and clean when we put her back together. Go up over the brake line like so. Arrange the unit correctly. Perfect.
slide that boot over so it kind of protects the unit. And then I don't think the wire is gonna move around, but let's zip tie it just to be safe. I think that was a pretty smart move. And of course, when you fire up the car again, check it, make sure it's not leaking. You might need to tighten it a little more. But again, no Teflon tape or anything necessary for this job. I've seen somewhere online where they've asked about that. Teflon tape really shouldn't be used with any kind of oil anyway. It's for home plumbing, yes. For oil in an automobile, not a big fan of Teflon tape. All right, let's get that zip tie. Doesn't have to be too tight, just something to keep that wire from potentially dangling down too low. Cut the excess, and we're done with this job. New sending unit installed. Let's go turn the key on and see if we do get some oil pressure reading. And with the car running, you can see our oil pressure gauge is now registering and working great. That was a big deal. So if your oil pressure gauge isn't working, go ahead and replace your oil pressure sending unit. Not an expensive part, not a very hard job to do at all. Awesome. That's a very important gauge to have working.